Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This won't necessarily apply to anyone outside of the UK. I understand that, but it is interesting to take a look at because it's the broad scope that we sort of see in day-to-day life. And make no mistake, if it's happening here, it's probably going to happen where you are as well, or it already is. Who knows? But the British Broadcasting Company, the BBC, I know, very, very funny, has decided to double down, triple down, if you will, on DEI targets. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, hitting that quota. They legitimately have a quota, and their target, their quote that they need to hit is 25%. That is, of course, after spending essentially $320 million on this already, and it being an abject failure because they've lost billions in revenue because people have decided to not pay for their TV license. Now, for those that don't know, TV license is something which most people feel like they have to have in the UK. You actually don't have to have it. So if you just watch things like YouTube or Amazon Prime or Netflix, you know, the things which most people tend to watch, you actually don't have to have a TV license. People feel like they're bullied into it. Again, for those outside of the UK, if you watch live TV or any BBC programmes, even on iPlayer in the UK, in Britain, you have to pay for something called the TV license. And it's kind of like a catch-all term because it makes you think that you have to have one for owning a TV. You don't. But it's a really brutal and stupid thing to pay for, especially in 2024. I mean, it's just dumb. If the BBC was producing good content, which they're not, there's some, few and far between, but by and large, they're not. You'd be able to just go on the open market and have a subscription, right? You wouldn't need enforcement officers to come at your door and essentially bully you and harass you into paying for a TV license. It's intimidation. They're constantly sending letters out which are quite awful. They are constructed in a way to make people feel like you have to do it and you are breaking the law, and if not, you're going to go to court. It's really, really quite bad actually in the UK. So essentially, the BBC just wants to spaff more of your money up the wall on programmes to say that you're a bigot and to show that they hate you. That's basically what they do. Because that's essentially all of what BBC stuff is nowadays. They will famously swap out white English heritage characters from history for black people, just for reasons, I guess. Traditionally, stories from A Christmas Carol, for instance, Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, random black people turning up, like all of this kind of stuff is just utterly nonsensical. And I say this time and time again, and I have said it time and time again, is that to appreciate and understand where we are in our history is to not shy away from the past. You must be aware of what came before to appreciate where we are now. The UK, if diversity matters to you, which very clearly it does in the BBC, you shouldn't shy away from the fact that at certain times in our history, there were no black people, right? Like, you just shouldn't shy away from that. That's stupid. If you want to hold diversity up on a pedestal, then you have to appreciate, by virtue of having that opinion, how far we've come. But again, these people don't care about that. It's always an erasure of history to become this weird, homogenous, grey, gelatinous blob that we call globalism. So anyway, here we go. Just thought we'd get into this. The British Broadcasting Company announced that it will increase its representation targets for its TV production teams from 20 to 25% across all production roles. I mean, this, FYI, is pretty indicative of BBC overall. And also everything else. Like, Amazon does stuff like this as well, right? Like, I've got to try and word stuff in the most tactful way, because I don't necessarily think hiring people with disabilities is an issue, right? Like, I think that's fine. I don't necessarily think hiring people that are black is an issue. I don't necessarily think having storylines about these things is an issue. I think it's how it's executed and how it is conceptualized on a company-wide level. Having quotas for it creates a force feed tube all the way through from, how you construct your hiring processes, how you write things, right the way through to, of course, things, being executed, creatively speaking, and given to us to consume. I think, and I know this will sound bigoted, This is sarcasm. It's not bigoted at all. I think diversity through casting is ridiculous, and it creates homogeneity, right? There is no diversity when you have diversity through casting. When every single program has the same level of quota hitting for it, you know full well, it's predictable. You know full well there's going to be a black person. You know full well there's going to be a Muslim. You know full well there's going to be this disabled person. You know full well there's going to be this story and this story. And there's archetypes that are generated through this because it's the sort of woke prism, left-leaning prism, and how the sort of ideological outlook, you know, white men are bad, there's white privilege here, the blah, blah, blah. So you know full well that there's going to be certain archetypes working in this frame. I always say, and I've said this time and time again, and I do firmly believe this, is it should be diversity through programming. Give us diversity through programming. That actually enables a wide-ranging creativity. You know, don't give me Black Vikings, for fuck's sake. It's so lazy, it's so creatively bankrupt, and it's so predictable. So egregious as well. Don't give me black nuns in, you know, ancient Eastern Europe and all this kind of... It's just nonsense. These things didn't exist, right? It's predictable, it's lazy, it's dog shit. What you should do, however, is... give a whole, you know, especially if this is your focus is diversity, diverse storytelling, etc., etc. You should give a huge amount of funding to overseas storytelling or storytelling in certain remits, right? So there should be, again, like Shogun, for instance, was so good because it was so authentic to its time, Japan, feudal Japan. But then do an offshoot story. Give me a tale in Africa. You know, for instance, tell me about Africa. Teach me its history, right? Teach me its myth and legends. Teach me something about Aboriginals in Australia. This diversity through storytelling rather than diversity through casting is much, much better. It also gives people a wider appreciation for histories and culture, and also just general geographical sort of stories and the sort of culture specific to those locations, rather than this globalist prism which we are forced to consider day in, day out. But yes, no, the BBC doesn't want to do that. I know I'm rambling quite a lot, but hopefully you find this quite interesting. So now, in a press release, the company said, the BBC is launching an ambitious new creative diversity commitment, i.e. not doing any creativity, to increase diversity and inclusion within programme making teams and ensure that the stories told on air are authentically reflective of audiences across the UK. It's not strictly true though, is it? That's not strictly true, because you know full well it's not going to be, it's not authentic to audiences across the UK, and people don't want to watch this stuff, right? People have switched off consistently. This was a report in December of 2023. The latest BBC annual report showed that the number of people buying a license had fallen by 500,000 to 24.3 million in the last year. This resulted in a decline in the license fee income from 3.8 billion to 3.74 billion pounds, which is a lot, man. That's a hell of a lot. People are just sick of it. They don't want to buy this shit. And make no mistake, that will rise even more. People are just switching off from it because they don't offer anything. So apparently it's raising targets across ethnicity, disability, socio-economic diversity from 20 to 25% across all production roles. And then they give us dog shit like this. You know, just random... I don't even know what this thing is. So not only did the company share that it was increasing its representation targets, but it also revealed it would invest over $105 million in content that meets the BBC's creative diversity criteria for TV and radio. Creative diversity criteria is the biggest sort of like double negative I've ever heard. There is no such thing as creative diversity when you have a quota to fill. It's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. It is gaslighting. So apparently this money will focus on aligning diverse on-air storytelling with stronger off-air representation in senior production roles and leadership within production companies. Basically forcing black people and Muslims, and because that is the totem pole of ideological left-wingness. It won't be Asians, right? Like it won't be Asian people rising to this occasion, getting higher roles in production companies. It's never that, right? It's never that at all. It will be very, very specific targets. Always very, very specific. It's so pathetic. So the company also revealed it spent nearly $320 million over the last 3 years to drive diversity and inclusion both on and off air. Cool. And it previously pledged around $150 million, so spent way over that. Dog shit. So apparently it requires potential productions to outline their plans to deliver the 25% target and how they will apply the inclusive production principles as part of the commissioning process. Utter nonsense and drivel. So the inclusive production principles require processes are in place for inclusive casting and crew. It demands that productions will provide specialist hair and makeup stylists to work with afro-textured hair and a variety of skin tones. And there you go. Like, that's an admission of exactly who this target demographic is aligned with. It's not about diversity across the board. It's just not. This sort of ideological nonsense that everything is pushed through now, this lens, it only goes very specific ways. It's just so pathetic. Productions will have access to diversity, inclusion, and equity, education, training, and resources. Basically, tell every white person that they're racist. To foster a culture of inclusion and transparency. Integration only works one way. Apparently, in the UK, British people have to integrate now to foreign nationals. Fucking make it make sense. I hate this. I absolutely hate my country. And don't get me wrong, like I love my country. You know, I live in the countryside. I recently took a drive out through beautiful green fields, and you know, just there and then I had an epiphany. I was like, this is England, right? This is the Britain that I know. Beautiful winding country lanes, you know, tiny little villages here and there with great little pubs and communities. Not this weird homogenous blob of shit that we have now become in certain cities. So anyway, BBC Chief Content Officer Charlotte Moore commented on the new targets and the company's spending promise and says, "We are committed to backing British," it's not fucking British, is it? "British storytelling, and I recognise the important role diverse-led indies play in telling these authentic stories." Oh, fuck off. "By increasing our investment in diverse content and enhancing..." I mean, it's not very British, is it? This guy's Rwandan. Come on. "And enhancing our off-screen diversity targets, we aim to create a more inclusive environment that authentically represents and resonates with all audiences." It doesn't resonate with, anyone. Barely anyone resonates with this shit. So that's why the viewership's down. You know, we've got the biggest population we've ever had, and the viewership is the worst it's ever been. So obviously it's not resonating with anyone. Obviously. Anyway, head of creative diversity, Jessica Shibley, said, "Our previous commitments set an industry benchmark of dog shit. Yeah. Building on the insights gained over the past 3 years, our new creative diversity commitments go further to deepen our dedication to making meaningful and lasting changes both on and off air, particularly in senior roles off air with influence with the creative output. We're focused on leading the way in representation, inclusion, and authenticity to ensure that the BBC continues to be impactful in serving all audiences, i.e., we hate all British people and we protect pedos and we just want loads of apparently random dogshit stories." Anyway, this is lame. I hate it. There you go. I'd love to hear your thoughts. This is undoubtedly happening in a place where you are as well, because this sort of bizarre agenda to erase people's history seems to just be going forward, and integration only works one way, not the way it should be. Anyway, take care. Bye-bye now.